Earlier this week, I put out a poll asking you guys if you wanted any questions relating to city planning, sustainability, urbanism, or anything that relates to the channel answered. So let's get into some of your questions that you guys asked. And for those of you who haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ethan. I'm the guy behind Climate and Transit, but let's get into some of your questions. So this first question comes to me from Rishi on Twitter, and they ask, do you think intercity rail should be built first or urban rail should be built first? A cool case study could be Canada, garbage intercity rail but punches above its weight for most urban rail systems, versus US, pretty decent intercity rail system, but most cities have subpar urban rail. Now this is a really good question, and I'm actually going to side with the Canadians on this one, unfortunately. I personally think that rail in cities is actually a lot more important than intercity rail. Intercity rail is still important, don't get me wrong. We should be building both. But to me, rail inside of cities is significantly more important to get people to live a car-free lifestyle. Most people aren't going to be leaving their cities on a daily basis, or at least their cities' regions, meaning that the most impactful way to get people out of their cars and onto public transportation would be to get them onto local public transit rather than intercity rail. And I'd like to say that there are kind of alternatives to driving between cities too. Flying, which really isn't any more sustainable, and there's still intercity bus services no matter how bad they are at the moment. So my next question here comes from Joe Who on Twitter, and they ask, how do you feel about returning light industry / manufacturing to city centers to foster non-service industry jobs? Also, do you think more focus of the wider urbanist community could be spent on smaller urban areas? Now, Joe, I'm going to be completely honest here. I'm not a full-on economist. I can't really answer the light industry jobs. However, I will be able to answer your question on returning, urbanism to smaller cities and smaller areas. I think Strong Towns does a pretty decent job with that at the moment, and I think that's really where they're kind of concentrating, is using that economic argument of, cities aren't sustainable if they're car dependent, to really kind of get smaller towns and smaller cities to kind of adjust for that. Now, of course, if you're on Twitter like I am, unfortunately I'm terminally online, you'll notice that a lot of people on there discuss only the larger cities, and that's because a lot of people just come from them. But it is great to have smaller city / smaller town representation, and I think it would be a really good idea to focus some of our urbanist efforts in the community over there as well. And like I said before, Strong Towns is doing a really good job of that. For my next question, we're going to jump over to Instagram, where our good friend Hassan asks, what do you think is the best way to encourage people to take more public transportation? Well, Hassan, I think one way that you can help people take public transportation is to just help them go on it with them. You see, a lot of people in this country actually have never taken public transit, especially bus services. A lot of people just don't know the systems, they don't know how it works. A lot of people really just don't understand transit in this country, and a lot of people fear it also just because they don't know how it works and haven't taken it. There are a lot of examples of where transit is faster than driving, but people don't take it because they don't know how to use it. We're all pretty much conditioned to driving everywhere, and so most people don't even know how to take the bus, where to get tickets for it, how to hop on, how to call your stop. It's really something that's just kind of lacking in this country, is education on public transit and how to use it. And I think showing people, like your friends, your family, how to take public transit would just be a really, really good step in that direction. But speaking of encouragement, can I encourage you guys to go check out my Patreon, where you can get videos early, your name in the credits, and exclusive access to extra videos and extra content within my videos. Anyways, let's get back to this video that we're on right now. Our next question comes to us from Caleb the Turtle, and he asks, what is your sleeper pick for a US city for urban form? Well, Caleb, this is an excellent question, and I think that there are actually quite a few different cities with sleeper picks in terms of urban form, and a lot of them come from the Midwest, but there are some outside of the Midwest. One of my favorites is St. Louis, Missouri. Now, this is a city that was absolutely decimated by urban renewal, but a lot of the neighborhoods that survived actually have some really excellent urban form. And I think St. Louis is very much a city that could be a very strong urbanist city. I also think the same thing for Pittsburgh and Cleveland too. They kind of fall in that as well. Milwaukee as well too. Now, these cities definitely need to do some freeway removal. That's going to be seriously important to really restoring their urban form. But at the moment, I think that they are absolute sleepers when it comes to it. Now, another city that kind of fits this mold is Baltimore. They're definitely doing some really good work there too. It's a really solid city for urban form that a lot of people sleep on. And one of the things about these cities is that rent isn't crazy in them either, which is why I'm a huge fan of them. There are some other ones across the country that I think definitely punch above their weight from what people actually think about them. But in all honesty, I think that the Midwest and Northeast definitely has the most amount of what I would call sleeper cities. Now, our next question comes to us from the Emperor's Artist, and they ask, do you think things are getting better or worse for transit and urbanism in the USA overall? Now, another really great question. You guys are absolutely cooking up some real great questions. But do I think urbanism in the US is getting better? My take, absolutely. We are definitely leagues above from where we were even 5 to 10 years ago. The US is definitely improving on pedestrian infrastructure, cycling infrastructure, and transit access. Now, the thing about it is that we really need to keep up the momentum on this. It's not exactly going to be an overnight thing. Things aren't going to get better immediately. You will see small changes throughout the country. Some areas are still going to suck more than others. But overall, I think that the US, North America in general, that includes Canada and Mexico, are all getting better in terms of urbanism, car-free developments, stuff like that. I mean, if places like Tempe, Arizona can be building car-free apartment developments, realistically, we're in a lot better place than we were even just 5 years ago. Alright folks, this next question comes from Eric M95 on Instagram, and they're asking thoughts on Brightline. So, I don't know which Brightline they're asking thoughts on, East or West, so I'll cover both of them. So Brightline East is a pretty reasonable higher speed rail system. I have to say higher speed because it's not high speed rail. It really doesn't hit that 125 mile an hour mark for very long on the trip. I think it's only about 10% of the trip between Orlando and Miami it's hitting that speed. But regardless, it's a nice experience for passengers. It's very frequent. It starts early in the morning and ends late at night, and they do extended services for special events. Either way, Brightline East is a solid, frequent regional intercity service that's very modern, very clean, very attractive to people who've never taken rail before, and I think it's an overall good thing that it exists, but we do need some more affordable alternatives in Florida, and I'm hoping Amtrak can provide that. I'd rather Amtrak work with Brightline than go, completely separate. I hope that those two can work together on making better intercity rail rather than what Brightline wants to do and completely try and quash out Amtrak. But anyways, Brightline West is looking to be an actual high-speed operation with speeds of 190 miles an hour and electrified trackage. It looks a lot faster than Brightline East, and running between the Inland Empire and Las Vegas is going to be a good option. I hope Metrolink can extend their connections and make them faster and more frequent between downtown LA and Rancho Cucamonga, where the train is actually going to end, Brightline West being that train. But it's pretty exciting that Brightline West is coming. Hopefully they can meet that Olympics deadline, 2028, but we'll see on that one. This next question comes to us from our good friend Gerald Powell over on Instagram, and they ask, which southern US cities have the best transit/infrastructure systems? Now, there's 3 that I'm really going to name here, and that's New Orleans, Atlanta, and Miami. They're not great cities by any standards, but they definitely do have some really nice neighborhoods. Miami and Atlanta both have metro systems. Atlanta outside of MARTA's real range is pretty bad, but inside of it, it's actually pretty decent. Miami has some really nice walkable neighborhoods. It has Metro Rail, Metro Mover, Brightline, Tri-Rail, multiple different systems, but most of those neighborhoods are very expensive to live in. Now, New Orleans, on the other hand, is affordable. It has some good urbanist neighborhoods, but overall, it's not perfect. Bus frequencies there aren't great, and the light rail just isn't as accessible as other systems. There is a really good southern city as well, too, that's kind of on the rise, and that's Richmond. They have service on the Northeast Corridor, and they've been starting to build up a BRT network around the city, so hopefully Richmond can really kind of climb the ladder and really become like the really standing urbanist city of the South. I have another question on Instagram, and it's from Benjamin Parlasek, and they ask, do you personally think that diesel passenger trains are better than diesel cars? And I 100% say that diesel passenger trains are better than diesel cars. For one, it's a matter of efficiency. A diesel train can move 500 plus times the amount of people that one diesel car can. Not to mention, it doesn't have rubber tires, meaning that you're not going to get that rubber pollution and microplastic pollution in the environment that you would from a diesel car. It's got all the efficiencies that trains have over cars. It's just the only difference is that they're both using diesel. Now, I'm not a big fan of using fossil fuels, However, they are significantly better than using any form of cars. So yeah, I got a lot of questions over here on Instagram, and I got a couple more for you. This next one comes in from Savanorio. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm probably not. But their question is, how can designing cities for multimodal transit systems help reduce temperatures in cities? Well, I can actually speak to that. So there is this effect called the urban heat island effect that takes place in a lot of urban areas. It's essentially where you have so much built up environment that they pretty much concrete asphalt will trap heat into them and then release it out a lot slower than, say, natural built products would. So essentially, making multimodal transit would reduce the amount of asphalt that we need in our city centers and urban areas, and reduce the amount of not only sprawl that we have, but also just the built environment, reducing the urban heat island effect. Also, this pedestrian and multimodal infrastructure is a lot more friendly to things like grass, trees, and other things that reduce the urban heat island effect. I don't know if you've seen this, but one of my favorite things in the world is grassy tram tracks. And it's essentially trams can basically run over grass. They don't need asphalt to run. So you can essentially just have full-on dedicated tramways where you have grass on the ground instead of asphalt. And not only does it do a really good job of reducing the urban heat island effect, but it also does an excellent job for helping water ground penetration happen, meaning that you reduce standing water in your urban areas. And so here's one of my last questions. It comes from Isan Adulia Raman, and they ask, do you think cables are feasible? You know, like cables that go up like high inclines. But I think that they're going to be really feasible for mountainous cities where you have those terrain issues, because unfortunately their capacity just isn't very high. It's somewhere between an individual car lane and a standard bus line. But realistically, for areas with, serious terrain issues that go on, like I know a lot of cities in Colombia use them effectively, and there are a lot of cities around the world that are built in very mountainous terrain that could absolutely benefit from them. But just for standard cities, like you aren't going to really need this in cities like Baltimore or New York City. I know the Roosevelt Island Tramway exists, but realistically, they're not going to become the main transit solution for a lot of areas just because they have such low capacity. And that's really what's going to hamper them. Now, areas with terrain differences, like I've said multiple times before, are going to really benefit from it. But other than that, I mean, yeah, they'll have their purpose, but they won't be a main transit system unless your city is literally built like completely on mountains. And our final question comes from a user named Real Acol on Instagram, and they ask, Chew? Choo-choo, buddy. But thank you so much, everybody, for asking all these wonderful questions. It was super fun to answer them. I'm hoping to make more of these videos if you guys really enjoy them. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And here's a special thank you to all of my patrons, especially Tony Stunts, who's in my Metro tier, and CC Marv MD, who's in my Trolleybus tier. Because without the generous support of patrons like you, I wouldn't be able to make content like I do. And if you want to become a patron yourself, the link is down below, along with my socials that are down there as well. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I'll see y'all on the next one.